Hi, Elvira. How are you? So I have 12:30 Eastern, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining me today. My name is John Little. I am the founder and owner of the Winner's Edge Coaching. And today I'm going to share a presentation, High Impact Leadership Cheat Codes to Unlocking Your Skills to Inspire, Influence, and Grow Your Income. So, really, what this is about are these are the key leadership principles and key leadership areas that I focus on as a coach and a consultant. And this is part of a program that I do for organizations. So I just wanted to share some of the big takeaways around some concepts of leadership that I think most find valuable. So with that little introduction about who I am, trying to get my slides going. There we go. So, as I said, my name is John Little. I'm based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I've worked in this space for more than 25 years. I've done coaching, consulting, leadership development, as well as a long-term focus on DE and I. And what's funny is those spaces really do connect very well, and they intersect a lot. A lot of the things you learn about being a great, influential, inspirational leader, they really connect a lot with what's important when you're trying to create cultures of inclusion within an organization. So the two really do line up pretty well. So my experience in both of those has really helped to serve me well and serve my clients well. And so I think, again, some of the things that we'll see today when we kind of dive into the content, you'll see where there's some real connective tissue. So without further ado, I really want to start with the concept around the mindset of where you are as you're working through your day-to-day work. Are you focusing on being a leader, or are you focused on being a manager? And there's two different disciplines and two different things that you do. Managers are really focused on managing the process. They're really focused on managing the outcomes, managing the outputs, managing the transactions on a day-to-day basis. And it's really more of a work focus, really more of an output focus. And I don't want to discredit that, because it's important that managers are managing. But when it stops there, when managers are only managing, they're not doing everything that they can. And they really need to lean into that space of being a leader. And a leader is that inspirational space. It's that space where you're driving people to action. You're inspiring people to do things in different ways. You're inspiring innovation. You're inspiring creativity. You're inspiring people to be their best. You're transforming them through the relationships that you build. You're transforming your opportunities to grow and develop people. And here's really kind of where leadership for me is such a huge area of focus for organizations. I truly believe that the more that you invest in your leaders from a transformational standpoint, the more that you invest in your leaders and developing them, the better your outputs will be, because you'll have stronger teams. Leaders should always be focusing on developing leaders. That's something that I say all the time, that leaders should be focusing on developing leaders. Number one job for a leader, for people who are on their team, is to manage and help manage their work, but more importantly, to develop them so that way they can be promoted off of your team. Right? And it may sound crazy. Like, why would I want to get people off of my team? Well, you want to develop people so that way their skills, so that way their knowledge, so that way they're able to move to that next step. They're able to move to that next level. They're able to move to the next opportunity. And the stronger that you do where you're developing people and you're building strong teams and you're building strong people, the easier your job gets, because you're then able to focus on strategy. You're able to elevate your eyes and get out of the weeds. The more that you're developing strong teams, and then you develop strong teams, you develop strong leaders, that develops a strong organization, because you have strength at many different layers. That's really what transformation is all about. So as we get into a little bit more around the differences here, the core of what I focus on is emotional intelligence as a foundation for everything that I do through leadership. And we know, anybody who's been in this space for a while, there's so many different studies, so much research that really just hammers home the point that EQ is a much bigger indicator of success than IQ, right? So EQ, that emotional intelligence quotient, that understanding people, understanding how to navigate people, it starts with me, right? Not me, John Little. It starts with each individual, right? Your self control. How aware are you of yourself? How aware are you of the things that are your motivators, your demotivators, that are your triggers, and are your derailers? The more that you're aware of those, then you can really start to spin into social awareness. You can really start to understand others, because first you have to understand yourself, manage yourself, give yourself the oxygen that you need, find the spaces that you can be your best so you can show up as your best self on a consistent basis. And then how can you understand others, and how can you help others to do the same? How can you influence? How can you grow? How can you meet people where they are? Once you're starting to work through your understanding your self-control and then have more social awareness, then you can get into the social skill. And the social skill is how you use those tools to connect with others and to help grow others and to help others be their best selves. And once you've done that, then you have that overall combination of self-control, self-awareness, social skills, social awareness, and then it really starts to all come together. And how do you do this? How do you start to learn those things? How do you understand yourself? How do you become more aware of yourself? Well, one of the tools that I use are emotional intelligence assessments. So there's two areas that I am certified in. I'm certified in DISC and I'm certified in Myers-Briggs. So those of you who are joining in the chat, or joining us out there on YouTube or on Facebook or on LinkedIn, I would love for you just in the chat to just pop in what emotional intelligence metrics are you using? Are you using any tools? Are you using DISC? Are you using Myers-Briggs? DISC and Myers-Briggs are the two that I'm certified in, so I'm most familiar and comfortable with that. But I know there's a number of other tools that are out there. So if you're using a tool, go ahead and drop that in the chat. I would love to hear what tools you're using and how you're utilizing them. So what I've done in conjunction with organizations that I've worked with in the past is really kind of combine the best of DISC and Myers-Briggs to help to determine what was coined by one of my colleagues and mentors as the people formula. And what the people formula does is it really pulls in those key areas of being extroverted or outgoing, being introverted and reserved. If you're familiar with DISC or Myers-Briggs, you'll recognize some of these terms, having a feeling or people preference, or having a thinking or a task preference. Now, even the way that I use the word preference, it's intentional, because we aren't just one thing. We are all a blend of all of these different areas. But in blending all of those different areas, we do have some that are more natural to us. We do have some that are more innate to us. We do have some that are more comfortable to us. We do have some that we do with greater ease and greater confidence. And those are our preferences. Those are our primary, our secondary, our tertiary, and our quaternary preferences. And it's just our default wiring. That's really all that means. And so when we look at the combination of those and we look at how they blend together, then this is really how we start to determine, all right, so from a self-awareness standpoint, who am I? And from that self-awareness standpoint, like, what is it that resonates with me? What is it that's unique about me? What is it that people recognize in me, or things that I recognize in myself? Just sharing from my preferences. My preferences are introverted, reserved, and feeling people. So having those preferences, that really drives me to be wanting to have that security, that safety, and create that safe and secure place for others. I like to have harmony. I like to have harmonious relationships. I like to have harmonious conversations. Those are things that allow me to be my best. I work best when working with a team, because I have that people connection, so I can lean into others and learn from them, and I can also feel as though that I can contribute to them. And really, what I want from all of those interactions are things that make me feel safe, secure, and peaceful. Right now, it's also important for me to do well consistently. So my secondary preferences takes me into the space of introverted thinking. That's my second preference. And then also, once I've kind of worked through those things, I always like to have fun. That's part of my process as well. When I get to a place where I'm only looking for results and I'm only looking to get things done, then I'm in my fourth preference, or my quaternary preference area. And when I'm there, it's funny, because I look and I act and I feel much different. It's less fulfilling. It's more challenging. I'm less engaged. But I can get things done there. It's just not my best self. So if I spend too much time there, the people that I'm working with will probably recognize that I'm a little bit different, or it may be more difficult to communicate with me, maybe more difficult to get things out of me, or maybe more difficult for me to be focused. Because what I do with that is it really pulls me so far away from my security and safety that I'm looking for, that it makes it challenging. So for everyone, whatever it is that they are, whatever it is that your area is, your primary area is, it's important again to get that first sense of individual self-awareness, and then from a self-awareness standpoint, recognize, like, where do I start? Then where do I go next? And when I'm moving throughout these different quadrants, moving throughout the different quadrants, then how does that really show up? Now, here's the other important thing, right? Just because I said that I start here having introverted preferences and feeling people preferences, that does not define me, right? There's a term that was coined, or phrase that was coined by one of my mentors that I use all the time. Labeling is disabling. So it's never appropriate to say, well, you're an introvert, or you're a feeler, or you're an extrovert, or you're a thinker, because it's not just that one sole thing, right? We are a blend of everything. We just may have stronger preferences than others. All right. So using that as a foundation, and again, talking about some of these key areas like self-control, for example, like self-control is a big thing. Once you're aware of the things that are your primary, your secondary, your tertiary, or your third, your quaternary, your fourth areas, then it allows you to be more conscious, and allows you to be more disciplined, allows you to be more focused on how you're regulating yourself, on how you're showing up, on how you're appearing and connecting with others through the ways that you behave, the ways that you communicate, the ways that you interact, the way that you listen, the ways that you make decisions. All of those things are part of that overall self-control. And then most important thing a lot of times is, are you responding or reacting? And often when we are within self-control, when we are aware of kind of how we're wired, and where we're feeling and how we're feeling, then we're allowed to respond. Our senses allow us to respond rather than having the emotional reaction. A lot of times emotional reactions come out of a place of fear. And when we're not in control, when we're not aware, then often that fear can be what drives us. That fear can be what drives our reactions. And so by having, again, that awareness and that control, it really helps us to get in that place of responding rather than reacting. Now, all of this is a really important foundation for one of the key elements that I focus on, one of the key elements that I think is just so critical when you're looking at how you are developing leaders, or how you're leading individually, and that is trust. And how you are establishing trust. This has been a game changer for so many leaders that I've worked with, this understanding the value of trust. It seems like it's so simple, right? Like everyone should just kind of, trust. Of course, it's there, it's basic. But the way that people build trust, and what happens when trust may be compromised or broken, it's so unique based on how people are wired, right? So here's the other part about trust, especially in the business world. Trust has to start with vulnerability, right? If you are going to be leading people, the easiest way for you to start to create those foundations of trust is to be vulnerable first, and demonstrate that you're a person, that you're not just a position, right? So by having being able to have some level of vulnerability, and being able to display that, that helps to build confidence in your teams. It helps to build confidence in those that are reporting to you. And then it also allows for the people who you're reporting to then let their guards down a little bit, for them to lower their walls just a little bit, for them to feel comfortable being a little bit more vulnerable. The more vulnerable and human you are, the more vulnerable and human you allow, intrinsically, you allow your teams to be, you allow those who report to you to be, you allow those within your organization to be. The more that you can be vulnerable, the more that you can show your humanity, the more that you can really demonstrate that, hey, this is something that's important for me to be able to build genuine trust, to build genuine, authentic relationships. Those are the things that really are those foundations of trust that are important. So what's that start to look like, right? When you have teams that are really built on a strong foundation of trust, and this is, remember I talked earlier, there's a lot of intersections between the work around leadership development, emotional intelligence, and the DEI space. Does this first bullet point resonate at all with anybody, right? When you have that culture, when you have that established within a team, when you have that vulnerability based trust, then you're able to better appreciate and accept differences and recognize that just because we have differences doesn't necessarily make us different. It just means that we see and experience the world in slightly different ways, and that's okay because that's what makes us strong. When we use this mindset of curiosity, right? We have a mindset of curiosity and not judgment, and that is our guiding principle. That's our guiding way that we approach things. That in itself can make such a huge difference in how teams connect when you approach things through that mindset of curiosity and not through the lens of judgment. When you recognize that people are individuals, right? And those individuals have value. And even if you don't always agree with them, even if you don't agree with the things that they may always say or the things that they always do, as a leader, finding where those pieces, where those nuggets of value are that you can recognize, celebrate, and how those can contribute to your team. Again, that can be a big deal. And then as a leader, focusing on other people's needs as a priority. You know, I got certified in DISC back in 2010, I believe. It's been a long time. Certified in Myers-Briggs back in 2016. And one of the things that I've said about emotional intelligence for as long as I've been practicing it and understanding it is it's almost a backwards way of being selfish, and not in a manipulative way, but the more that I can focus on meeting your needs, the more that I can focus on learning what it is that you need, what's important to you, what you value, the better that I can do as a leader at doing those things, then it's easier for me to get my needs met then. Because if I first meet your needs, it makes it a lot easier for you to meet my needs, right? So it's not, again, it's not a manipulation, but it's understanding how you can work to meet someone's needs, meet them where they are, focus on their needs as your priority, and then you will start to get your needs met. And you'll have to do less demanding. You'll have to do less managing in some cases. You certainly have to do less micromanaging, but you definitely can start to see how your job becomes easier, how you're able to be a better and stronger leader. And then you'll see those relationships are stronger. You'll see that one of the things that I focus on a lot is legacy, right? You'll see that you can start to build out a strong legacy within your teams simply by focusing on meeting their needs first. Now, when I talk about a game changer, right, I'm going to introduce you to this concept called the trust ladder. I didn't coin this. This was something that I learned. J.J. Brunn and Guy Harris are the ones who I learned this from. And what they did in breaking down how trust is built based off of your preferences has been such a light bulb moment for so many. You know, this is something that I shared in a leadership workshop for an organization that I worked with a few years back. And one of the people in the room had been a manager for 25 years. He was a senior leader at this organization. He was a managing director, as a matter of fact, covering a very large area, a very large state. Was accomplished, but struggled. He was accomplished in the business space, but he struggled a lot of times with the people space. And after understanding this trust ladder, he said there was such a light bulb moment, and he really started to understand why he had so many different struggles in some of his relationships. So let me unpack this for you. So the way that the trust ladder works, it's based off of our preferences, right? So if you're someone who has stronger thinking or task preferences, then often you start from a place of, I must first trust you. I must first see evidence over time of your work. I must see consistent delivery. I must see consistent outputs. I must see that you are going to produce, you're going to do, you're going to accomplish, all of the things that I'm expecting of you from a transactional lens. I'm going to get those. And until I get any of those, I'm not going to give you my trust. Okay. So that's where we're starting on the thinking side. On the feeling side, it's I must like you first. I must connect with you as a person. I must be able to relate to you in some way. I must want to build a relationship with you, learn more about you, and then be vulnerable with you so you can learn more about me. And if that doesn't exist, if there isn't any opening to a relationship, if there isn't any opening to a personal connection, if there isn't any opening to me wanting to learn more, you demonstrating that you want to learn more about me, then trust is not going to start to get built. Just this one nugget was that game changer for that leader. He said, I never thought that somebody would first have to even think about liking me before they would trust me. I have always tried to get people to trust me by showing them over and over and over again that I'm reliable. Now, for him, that works because that's how his mind is wired. But he missed out on a number of people who he didn't connect with because they were looking to connect with him as a person. They're looking for that relational trust. So again, trust starts to be built through this ladder. Trust over time on the thinking side for those who have thinking or task preferences based on performance over time, based on demonstrating performance, based on continuing to deliver, right? Over on the people side, the more that I get to know you, the more that you get to know me, the more trust builds there. The more that there's a relationship, the more trust builds there. The more that I can start to see that you are someone who I actually have a connection with, the more the trust builds there. And then it continues based on how over time that continues to evolve. What happens, it's happened so many times, and it's so interesting that the more that you start to build trust on your side of either the thinking preference or the feeling preference, the more that trust starts to get built, then you start to cross over to the other side. So if you start on the transactional side, and here's the thing, these are both perfectly fine. There's no judgment on either one of them. However you build trust is how you build trust. The main point of this is to build awareness of it. The more that you start to see someone performing over time, but the more you start to build that trust, the more you start to like them. The more you start to think, this is someone who I actually like. This is somebody that I can relate to. This is somebody who gets me, because you've seen that evidence over time being built. Same thing over on the feeling side. The more that you start to build a relationship with someone, the more you start to understand them as a person, the more that you start to have those commonalities, the more that you start to get some of that emotional bond, that emotional feeling that comes with them, the more you start to trust them. You know what? They're really good at their job. They're really good at what they do. I really do recognize the value of their work. But if you never cross over between the two, if you never even start to understand where those foundations start, then it's really hard to navigate through those relationships. And I've had experiences with those on the feeling side who have said, like, I just wanted to build a relationship with that person. I just wanted them to be my friend. I just wanted them to be recognized. I just wanted to be recognized. And it never happened. And so I never trusted them. And it's really fascinating how this one works. So again, would love to see in the chat, and I see a couple of great comments coming in here. Thank you. I would love to see in the chat, is this an aha for anybody? Anybody get something out of this? Because, and again, this is just part of an entire module on trust that I do. But this is kind of like that big takeaway, that big nugget that people always refer to. I've had people print this out and put it up on their wall as a reminder. And there's another one I'll show you here as we go a little bit further. This is a reminder of some of the things that we have to be mindful and conscious about. So let's talk about some of the symptoms that we see. When we see teams that lack vulnerability, teams that have invulnerability, these are things that you may recognize within your teams or within your organizations. It makes it a lot harder for us to do the work that we need to do because we are afraid to share, because we're afraid to contribute, because we're afraid to give feedback, right? All of the things that are necessary for us to build trust. If we don't have that vulnerability within the team, it's really hard for that trust to grow, for it to be built. And you can just look at the symptoms over here on the left-hand side of this slide and think about, if you have these within your teams as a leader, are you focusing your best and highest use of time on leading the team, or are you putting out a whole bunch of fires? Or are you dealing with a whole bunch of things that are just kind of being distractions from the work? Are you dealing with a lot of things that are making your job just quite simply harder because you don't have that foundation of trust, right? So we want to do our best as leaders to not have these things that go on. We want to build those trust strengths within the organization. So then how do you do that? What are some of the things that you can do as a leader to really help to make sure that your teams have that vulnerability, have that trust, and they really are able to grow and develop the way that you need them to, right? So one of the first things that you can do as a leader is you can admit where you have your opportunities, right? Weaknesses, mistakes, flaws, however you want to say it, admit that, right? Don't be shy to say, hey, I dropped the ball on that one, or hey, that's my fault, that's my bad. Hey, let's learn from this together. Like I'm always willing to learn from the things that I can do better. Saying those things to your team and also demonstrating them is so huge, because that will go such a long way in helping your teams grow and develop. Don't be afraid to ask your teams for help. Don't be afraid to say, hey, this is something I just don't really know about. I need to lean into you. I need to understand more. It's such a simple way of showing vulnerability. But there are some leaders, you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't. There are some leaders that are just terrified to ask for help because they think it'll make them look weak, or they feel like they have to know it all. They have to have all the answers. And that's just not it. That's just not the way that people work. It's just not the way that people engage. And especially as we're looking in the future of work, and as work continues to evolve, the more that we can do in kind of breaking down these barriers, the better. I'm going to talk a little bit here about this SBI open communication model in a bit, but that's a big part of it too, right? As a leader, being able to communicate effectively and be able to have the right types and levels of dialogue, that's going to be so critical as well to your ability to connect with your teams. And then, what you ultimately want is this last bullet point. You want teams to be wanting to work together. You want them to be engaged. You want them to be excited about working with one another. So let's talk a little bit about communication, because communication really starts with your intention. So how is your intention? What are your intentions when it relates to having conversations? So when you have these poor intentions, then it's going to be very difficult for you to have effective and meaningful conversation and effective and meaningful dialogue. And dialogue should always be the goal in communication. Dialogue is the back and forth. Dialogue is sharing of information, sharing of perspectives, sharing, approaching through curiosity, sharing what you may think, what you may want, but also listening, and also receiving, and also accepting, and also taking all of the things, putting them on the table, and figuring out how do you have the best outcome from that dialogue. But if you have any of these intentions that are on the screen here, it's really hard to have that dialogue, right? Think about it from not just your standpoint, but think about it if you're going into a one-on-one meeting with somebody, and you really need to be able to connect. You really need to be able to make decisions. You really need to be able to execute or strategize. You really need to be able to do any of those things or all of those things. What would that experience be like if the person who's sitting across the desk or across the table or across the screen from you had these intentions that they were bringing to the conversation? Do you think that it would work out well, or do you think it would be a challenging conversation, right? More than likely, it's going to be a lot more challenging if people have these intentions. So it's important to surface these and recognize that when you have these poor intentions, it's going to be a lot harder for you to have effective, meaningful dialogue. So let's break it down to what are the 4 goals of that healthy and productive dialogue, right? We want to first identify, we want to learn, what are those common objectives? What are we here to talk about? What do we want to accomplish? What can we agree upon right away that are the things that are important to the both of us or to the group of us? Recognize that we need to listen first, right? Because there's multiple sides to any truth. There's multiple truths that people have. If there are any parents out there, right, you know that there are usually 3 sides to the story. There's your side, there's the other side, and then there's the truth whenever you're dealing with somebody telling you what happened and you have to figure out what's next. That's the same with parenting. That's the same with leadership. That's the same in any relationship where you're part of a conversation and you're trying to get something accomplished. Then, recognizing that you have to find the truth as one of your primary goals. Then in order to get to the outcome, in order to get to results, you have to get clarity on what we're talking about. We want to get clarity on what we need to be focusing on, and then get that buy-in, get that agreement that this is the thing that we're looking at. We want to narrow that scope. We want to bring that focus in a lot clearer, so that way you can get to the results. And then you want to have those strong relationships based on the foundation of respect and curiosity. So now that we've established what are those goals, what are our goals of healthy, productive dialogue, we want to lean into those, right? Because this is what successful people tell us. Success is not always getting your way. It's not getting other people to change to really suit what you want or what you need. That's not what success is. Success is really being able to get to positive outcomes, be able to talk things out, be able to have conversations, have dialogue, have engagement in a way that's going to be productive. And that way you're not acting out. You want to talk things out and not act them out. One of the exercises that I've done in this workshop is you start to think about our childhood. We take yourself back to when you were a kid. And when you didn't get your way, or when you were upset, what were some of the things that you would do? And I would hear slamming doors, I would hear stomping feet, I would hear pouting, I would hear shutting down, disconnecting, I would hear, yelling, cursing, all of these behaviors that people would share that they did as a child when they didn't get their way. Now bring it to today. Do you do the same things? Do you still act out when you don't get your way? Right? That's just part of human nature. That's just who we are. That's just our emotions, but that's fine. And we want to recognize that in order for us to be successful, in order for us to have healthy, productive dialogue, while we recognize the emotions exist, we also want to pivot and shift the focus to our behaviors. We want to be able to talk things out. We want to be able to have conversation. We want to be able to communicate. We want to be able to work and navigate through the things that we need to in order to get to those positive outcomes. So how do we do that, right? What's the process of a healthy, productive dialogue? Well, the first thing is we have to try to stop convincing others to think the way that we think. We have to stop trying to find ways around the conversation, and we need to actually have the conversations. And then we need to take responsibility, right? As leaders, taking responsibility and engaging in that healthy, productive dialogue is one of the biggest, most important things that we can do. So again, why is this so important? I'm spending a lot of time on this healthy, productive dialogue because it's so foundational to what we need to do as leaders. In addition to trust, we have to communicate. Whenever I talk with anyone, leaders, CEOs, anyone else in HR, when I say, what are some of the things that you struggle with? Trust, communication, change. Guess what we're going to talk about today? Trust, communication, change. Guess what I do consulting and coaching on? Trust, communication, change. You see a theme here. These are the things that people struggle with so much in leadership roles, but it's so foundational to be able to do them well in order for you to lead and grow. So why is it important for us to have that healthy and productive dialogue? Because when you have that, regardless of where you line up on introverted, extroverted thinking, feeling, wherever you line up on that, it doesn't really matter because it's the same things. People are looking for respect. They're looking for trust. They're looking for credibility. They're looking for you to be honest, right? They want those results. They want those outcomes. They want to be recognized and appreciated. They want to contribute. They want to be effective in their teams, and they want to be part of the picture. They want to be part of that victory. They want to be part of that celebration. They want to be part of what is successful. Success feels good. Struggle doesn't, right? That's just a reality. When you're successful, when you're happy, when you're productive, when you're making things happen, that's a good feeling. You feel accomplished. You feel encouraged. You feel inspired. When you're struggling, everything feels so much harder. It feels so hard just to do the basic things. It feels like everything, you're just dragging a sled through mud. So when you're struggling, you want to get to that place of success. And these are the things that we're talking about today. So how do you get there? So what are some of those steps to that healthy and productive dialogue? Here's some tangible takeaways that you can focus on. That before you even get into some of these conversations, before you get into especially difficult, challenging conversations, you have to work on yourself. We have to go all the way back to what we talked about I'd say 25 minutes ago when it came to emotional intelligence. And you have to work on yourself first. You have to understand yourself. You have to understand, you have to be self-aware. Then you have to understand what are your triggers, what are your motivators, what are your demotivators, and then you need to lean into self-control. You need to identify what's the right conversation that I need to have. And in focusing on what that right conversation is, I need to stop telling myself stories. I have to stop confirming things in my head that I thought, that I've assumed, that I've projected. All of those things are parts of the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So that's again a big part of self-awareness is this something that's real, or is this something that a story is this part of a story that I'm telling myself? So after you've done that, then you can start to focus on those goals of healthy and productive dialogue, right? And you want to hold that conversation well. So it's partly identifying the right conversation, but then holding it well. And then SBI is the situation behavior impact, right? So identifying the situation, articulating the behaviors that were observed, and then what was the emotional impact? Recognize I said the emotional impact last, because the situation is fact-based, right? Can't dispute the facts. You can put the facts out on the table. Wednesday at 3 p.m., we were in the conference room. That's not up for dispute. The behavior is what you observe, right? So now that's where you're starting to layer in your perspective. And what I saw was, what I experienced was, what I recognized was, right? Those are your behaviors. That's your perception that you're putting in after you've already established the facts. And then how I felt about it was, that's the impact. That's where the emotion comes in. Right? It's really important that you follow that process, establish the facts, share your perspective, and then get to the emotion. Because when you lead with emotion, what do you usually get back? You usually get back emotion. And if it's a heated conversation, if it's a conversation that you may have different perspectives, you may have different opinions, you may have something different that maybe even experience the same thing in a different way. When you start with emotion, it's a lot harder to get back to the facts. And then once you've done that, once you've done your SBI, then open the door to dialogue. That's the most important part. Is that how you saw it? Tell me about your experience with that. What was your perspective on that? I've shared the way that it felt for me. How was it for you? Like, those are things that you do to open up the dialogue. And then it's not over, right? Because there could be a third step as well. If there are things that need to be done, if there's some healing that needs to be done in a relationship, if there's work that needs to be done, if there's outcomes that are on the line, then you want to make sure to agree to a plan for follow-up. You have to agree to what are the next steps from that. And then you have to hold yourself accountable, and then also hold others accountable as well. But you can't really fully do that unless you've gone through this process first. And that's why we lay it out in this specific way. So let's talk about change, right? What are the three things that I talked about that have been the biggest challenges? Trust, communication, change. Trust, communication, change. Trust, communication, change. I hear it over and over again. Sorry for the loops on this slide. I didn't mean for it to do it multiple times. It's probably dizzying. So let me pause that. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. All right. So, how you implement change and how you approach change is so critically important. So the components of change aren't really the only things that we want to focus on. We want to focus on the components of change, but also, and that's change management. Change management is really managing the processes of change. It's the strategy of change. Change leadership also layers in the people part of change. Now, a lot of times when it comes to change, we're not even interested in the conversation around it, right? We're so locked into the way that we want to do things, and the fact that the things are to be done in a specific way, that sometimes we're not even open to the importance of change and how we can make things easier or better, right? It all, again, goes back to EQ, being able to recognize the things that are part of the overall picture, our self-awareness, our self-control, our social awareness, our social skills, and then the ownership of it. But EQ is that best practice when it comes to change. When we're looking at change, it's not about right and wrong. It's not about convincing somebody of something, especially, and this is the change leadership piece, right? Change is really about understanding what someone is bringing to the table as it relates to the transformational elements of change. Because here's the reality: change doesn't always work. It works sometimes, and it really depends on the people that are part of the change and how those people are being led through the change. It's never enough to just announce change. It's never enough to just implement change. You have to lead people through the change, because change is emotional as well as it is transactional. So we talk about managing the transactions, the strategy, the processes, but also the emotional transitions of change. And it's a really simple formula that we need to do here. We need to establish what's our current state and why our current state isn't enough. Why current state has to change. Current state can feel comfortable. Current state is predictable. Current state is reliable. Current state is something that can be done with your eyes closed a lot of times. And sometimes that's what it has to change because business has evolved, because times have evolved, because we need to do things differently. We need to have different outcomes. We need to have different processes. We need to have different technologies. Whatever the case is, we have to be able to articulate and show the value of why we need to move from this comfortable, cozy current state by articulating the pain. What are the risks or the consequences of us not changing? And then we have to move into transition, right? And transition is really helping to spell out what are the benefits of that change, why the change is important, what will we get from the change from an individual and a collective basis. Why? Because remember, we're talking to people on multiple perspectives, multiple preferences. And if you're just talking about business outcomes, and I've seen this a number of times, when leaders only talk about business outcomes and business value and why it's great for the company and why it's great for the shareholders and why it's great for KPIs or why it's great for the spreadsheet numbers. When leaders only talk about that, you're completely missing the people side of the equation. And the people who are sitting there and thinking, yeah, but what about me? How does that connect with me? Why is that important to me? How is it going to make things better for me as part of this organization that you're asking to be part of this change? So it's really important that as we're thinking about what's the remedy, what's future state looks like, why is future state better for me? That's something that it's a mindset. It's a different way of thinking about things that sometimes we need to do as leaders. And the reality of the situation is as we are leading through change, people are going to have different experiences. Some people love change because they're like, hey, change is great. I'll always want to do something new and different. Some just get completely overwhelmed by it. And it's like, just let me know when it's done, right? Let me know what I have to do. Let me know when it's done. Some are just resistant to change. They want no part of it. Will throw up roadblocks left and right. And you have to, again, connect with those people, understand what they're going through, and try to help them to see the benefits of that change. That's that remedy piece is really important. Some people, it's going to be hard because they're stuck in those old behaviors. They're stuck in their ways. They're stuck in their processes. They're stuck in the things that they believe are the best way to do things, or maybe sometimes even the only way to do things, right? So you have to lead those people through change as well. Again, leaning into emotional intelligence, leaning into your EQ, leaning into what's important to them. What do they value? Meet them where they are, so that way you can start to help to evolve that. So there's a number of things that people connect with as it relates to change. Now, we talked about trust, we talked about communication, we talked about change. And again, these are all individual modules of a longer program that I offer. But it's again part of a bigger leadership development program. And part of this is situational leadership. Situational leadership has been a big piece as well, especially for emerging leaders, especially for those who are either in roles where they have led before, or they're in their first leadership role, where they were individual contributors and they were the rock star in their role. They were the ones who really were getting it done. They were the ones who were really outstanding and excellent. They had the ability to do the job almost with their eyes closed. And so because of that, they got promoted. And now they're in a leadership role. Here is where a lot of times they tend to struggle in growing in their leadership journey, is because situational leadership is a space that doesn't get enough oxygen. And really what situational leadership is, it's the confluence of task behaviors, being able to do the task, being able to articulate how to get things done, but it's also the emotional support that a leader gives for those relationship behaviors. So it's the tasks, how do I do it? It's the emotional support, but here's that last piece that's the big nugget that gets missed, is the readiness level of people who are being led. And the readiness level, understanding the readiness level of people who are being led is a big takeaway. And it's something that is challenging because it's not always obvious. That's where relationships come into place. That's where trust comes in, having established trust. Here's where communication comes in, being able to have some challenging conversations, as well as being able to understand where people are and how can I meet them where they are. So our 4 readiness levels that we look at is someone who is What we call R1 readiness is being unable or unwilling or insecure. So either they don't know, or they don't care, or they're not really trying to learn, or they're just so uncomfortable that they're kind of like stuck in place and they're not able to move, right? So when you have someone who is at R1 readiness level, then you need to calibrate your leadership style and some of your leadership behaviors to meet them where they are, to move them along the spectrum to somewhere else, move them into R2, or they may not necessarily be able, they may not have the proficiency, they may not have the knowledge, but at least they're willing to try, right? That can be a victory in of itself. Is someone at least willing to try, or they feel confident that they'll be successful eventually. Now, if someone is already here where they're R2, they just don't know, but they're willing to learn, that's a great starting place, because now I can focus on giving you the tools to be successful, and I don't have to spend as much time on the emotional part of coaching you up, right? Now, R3, that's a challenging space where someone can do the job, they're just not doing the job, right? So that takes a different type of leadership that you need to, different leadership style, a different way that you need to lead situationally through that, because that's really about, okay, you have the skills, you have the knowledge, you have the capacity to do the job, but you're just not doing it. So let's start to unpack what's missing. Why are you struggling? Why are you stuck? Why aren't you participating? And then when you have someone who's an R4 where they're able and they're willing, this is a good place to be, but it doesn't mean that your job is done. You still need to lead through this situation, but you're able to do more delegating in these scenarios and delegating in these situations. All right, so a few more things to talk about here, and I want to leave a little bit of time here at the end for Q&A. I see we've got about 13 minutes left, so I want to leave some time for some Q&A. One of the other things that I do is I do a Myers-Briggs team workshop. So it kind of pulls in all of the things that we've talked about so far, but also we look at the team as a whole, and we look at where are the things and where are the areas that you are connected, and also what are the things that are challenging as a team. And by working with a team together and getting these things out on the table, it helps us to really start to look at what are the key areas that we can stop, start, and continue. What are the things that we need to start doing differently? What are the things that maybe we need to stop doing because they're not serving the team well? They're causing more distraction, causing more challenges and problems. And what are some things we need to continue, maybe tweak, maybe iterate, maybe do a little bit of an adjustment on? And then how are we going to hold each other accountable to our start, stop, and continue? So part of that process is taking everyone through what I call the expert curve. And so the expert curve is it's a process of self-evaluation and a process of self-analysis and self-awareness. And it really looks at 4 different areas. Like, in what things do I consider myself to be an expert at? What things do I consider myself to be a master at? What things do I just consider myself to be competent at? And what things am I just honestly pretty incompetent at? So for me, when I do this expert curve, where I'm an expert is in coaching and developing and mentoring and leading and helping leaders grow. That's where I am an expert. I'll say candidly and honestly that I would say that I'm a master in DEI strategies. I'm a master in working with organizations around their diversity and inclusion efforts. And the reason why I say that I'm not an expert there, I'm a master, there's so many different facets to DE&I. There's so many different components. There's so many different ways to approach it. Like, my approach is to focus through a lens of inclusion and build inclusive cultures first. And by building inclusive cultures based on data and based on engagement, then that will help us to reach our outcome of diversity. I'm more of an expert on cultural diversity than I am on things in the areas of gender and identification. And you know, I saw a couple comments from Enoch here around neurodivergency, right? And I connect with that. My son is neurodivergent. My son, 8 years old, he's on the autism spectrum. Prior to him being born, I didn't really know a lot about that space. I'm learning more and more every single day, but I'm not an expert in that because I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I'm still developing my knowledge in that space. Places that I'm confident when it comes to things that are, you know, more business related, more the strategy around business. I can do it it just takes me more work to do it. It's not natural to me. It's not second nature. Things like marketing, things like, uh, the sales part of it, things, kind of like the business, the kind of the core fundamental business, like that's not my favorite place. It's not my comfort spot. It's not my sweet spot. I can do it. It just takes me more effort. Where am I incompetent? Spreadsheets. Like, don't ask me to do something in Excel because it's not going to work out well for anybody, right? But things like that, like things that are like super, super, super intense data, super, 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 like, have to be like structured. That's just not my space. I don't do well in those scenarios. So those are things that I just consciously choose to outsource to other. Other thing is design and things that are artistic and creative. Like I can say a vision, but if you put me down with a pen and paper, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. So I know where I am incompetent. And so what do? I need to lean into others to do this. So this is why this is so valuable to do as a team, because when you have each individual recognize where they're an expert, where they're a master, where they're competent, and where they're incompetent, and then you put that all on the table and say, here's who I am. And then we can start to see, oh, I need to be working with you because you complement my blind spots a lot better. I can lean into you for this areas that I'm incompetent and I'm an expert here. You need to be coming to me. Putting all those things together as a team and being able to have those conversations is so super valuable, especially for the team and the leader. And then we use that as a foundation for this, what I call the hallmark. And so once we have done all the work, and I do ground this in Myers-Briggs, but once we've done all of that work, we start to develop what's called a team type. And the team type helps us to really recognize who we are as a team. We put everything together, we put it all on the table, we recognize this is what our team type is from a Myers-Briggs lens. And then we can start to create what I call the hallmark, right? And so the hallmark really says, as a team, here's who we are. Here's what we represent. Here's what we do best. Here's what we do well. And this is what we're going to do going forward. It's really kind of like your guiding principle as a team. It's really a thing that you lean back to when times get tough or when you have struggles. The hallmark is something that really helps to define who your team is. So I do this as a half-day workshop, sometimes a day, depending on the scale of the team. But I found really great success doing this Myers-Briggs team workshop for organizations. All right, so we are at the point of the presentation where I wanted, as I said, leave some time for questions and answers. So I'm just going to scroll through the comments. But if you have any other comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We're on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn Live. We're also on YouTube. So any comments that you have, I'm able to see them here. So I see, the couple of comments around neurodiversity. Yeah, you're right. These have not really been calibrated for those who are neurodiverse. So while our EQ, our EQ matrices, as you see, or our assessments, they do have a little bit of a bias as it relates to neurotypical. It also has a bit of a bias to people being able to approach them through the space of being in a good mental health space. So, sometimes there's pre-work that needs to go in with organizations before we start to do any of these assessments. But I will say this, even without going as deep as doing a full-on DISC or Myers-Briggs or Strength Finders, whatever assessment you choose, the core concepts around self-awareness, self-control, social awareness, and social control, those are universal. So either you can do an EQ assessment or not. I think you still have the same foundations that you lean into as it relates to building trust, communicating well, and being able to effectively lead through change. And it grounds in the EQ of approaching the world through curiosity, building genuine, authentic relationships, and also connecting with people where they are through that lens of understanding yourself first. All right. So if there are no other comments or questions, I really do want to thank you for taking the time to join me here today. Hopefully you got something of value out of this workshop, please do reach out to me. We'll connect on LinkedIn, because I definitely want to learn more about what you're doing in the space of neurodiversity, as well as share more about my experiences and see if there's a connection to build off of there. But if you click on this QR code, this will, or if you take a shot of the QR code, this will direct you to how to contact me. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn pretty frequently throughout the day. Reaching out to me on LinkedIn, www.linkedin.com/in/Big John Little, or you can reach out to me directly via email, john@thewinnersedgecoaching.com. Thank you again so much for taking out this time on a Monday, getting your week started. Hopefully you got something that will inspire you and carry you through the week. And until the next time we talk, have a great one, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.